It's great to have an opportunity to introduce the formidable Timothy Smiddy to a wider audience. I wrote about this moment on the 9th of October 1924 when Mr. Smiddy called on President Calvin Coolidge and presented his credentials as Minister Plenipotentiary. This was a momentous occasion. It was a real milestone both in Irish diplomatic history, because for the first time we had somebody with that independence and formality of status as Minister Plenipotentiary. But it was also very significant in the history of the Commonwealth, because it was the first time one of the dominions attained this status. So we pushed open a door that other dominions subsequently came through. And apart from what I wrote, I think it's fascinating in a number of respects. First, there's the influence of an individual personality on this moment in history. Of course, there was an impetus here, there was a tide of history, this would have happened at some stage. But I think that Smiddy's personality made it happen when it did, and otherwise it could have taken longer, maybe we wouldn't have been the first. He was very stubborn, very persistent, very focused and determined. And he also was a kind of reassuring figure. He seemed to have exuded a certain gravitas and people were comfortable with him. There was a quotation at the time from a senior official in the State Department saying that this is an intelligent, straightforward fellow. I mean, it sounds obviously patronizing, but it was intended as a compliment. So this guy wasn't going to do anything very rash. Another aspect I think that's fascinating is the role of the various actors in this drama and how familiar we became with those roles as they played out in subsequent decades. You had Congress pushing in the background, of course, very much influenced by the Irish-American vote, trying to nudge this forward. You had the State Department very nervously looking over its shoulder at the British Embassy and the British authorities. And the story back in London was also very, very interesting, because when finally in spring of 1924 the Irish government pushed and said, it's time, this should happen, you had a big debate there. The Colonial Office was relatively relaxed. I think they probably saw this as inevitable at some stage. Not at all relaxed in the Foreign Office. A big debate among the mandarins there. Some said, no, this should not happen at all. This is just going to erode the whole meaning of empire. Others saying, well, let them go ahead, but make it a trade representative or just as little dignity as possible. So it came to Ramsay MacDonald as Prime Minister and he had to arbitrate. He came down in favour of letting us go ahead with certain conditions. But the interesting point was that Ramsay MacDonald was Prime Minister, but double-hatted also for a short period as Foreign Secretary. So the people in the Foreign Office didn't actually have their guy at the negotiating table pushing their viewpoint. So who knows, history might otherwise have been different. Now, another point, and just look at the picture again, I think it's really interesting seeing the formality of dress here. Now, of course, presentation of credentials, it's always a very formal moment. Nobody dresses casually. But Smiddy would have loved this formality because you saw that theme coming out again and again. It was important for this infant state to have the garb of statehood, the dignity. And so, under Smiddy's tutelage and on his watch, when W.T. Cosgrave came to America as the first official visit by an official Irish leader in January 1928, it was top hat and tails all the way, because for them, this was an image they very much wanted to project, this image of formality and dignity. And I think the final point that strikes me is just how modern, in a way, Smiddy's agenda was before and after he presented the credentials. Of course, he was dealing with Irish America, very complex at the time because the Civil War divisions were playing out in Irish America. But beyond that, he was very concerned about immigration, getting a specific quota for Irish immigrants to the United States. He put a huge emphasis on the trade, investment, tourism agenda, just like we do today. So very, very contemporary in many ways. So as I said, a formidable man at a fascinating time. We have his picture here on the wall in the embassy on the stairs. I pass it by every day, and I often give a nod, pay my respects to Mr. Timothy Smiddy.